during the talk, be thinking of more information you'd like to hear from our speaker and how you'd like to pick her brain. She's a wealth of knowledge and experience to share with you.
Good morning. Our speaker, Tina Callais, proudly and gratefully acknowledges she is still evolving as a person. Is this still going on? Here we go. Sorry about that, y'all. All right, let's try this again. Our speaker, Tina Callais, proudly and gratefully acknowledges she is still evolving as a person thanks to her family and to the people where she grew up, married, and raised her 2 sons, and where she was educated. This includes Nicholls State University. In December of 1981, Tina graduated with a degree in communication arts in 3.5 years and was inducted into the Nicholls State Hall of Fame. She received that honor because of her exemplary and forward-thinking efforts in radio and television on campus, with national organizations, and in the community. Tina will share some of those years with you and how it impacted her career, life, and understanding of why nothing is off limits. Her career reflects that. She spent over 30 years working on the air in sports and news, producing documentaries on coastal erosion and other impactful subjects, writing advertising copy, freelance writing for magazines and newspapers, working on a multi-layered FEMA-funded statewide hurricane education project, and more. Yes, there is more. Tina DeSalvo now has found her way into the fictional world as a novelist. In 2008, with a diagnosis of advanced stage 3 breast cancer, she decided to seriously pursue her passion for writing the stories that were swimming around in her creative head. As a result, Tina has been dubbed a fresh, humorous voice in women's fiction and romance, where she brings her knowledge and passion for the culture, traditions, and people of Cajun country and New Orleans into many of her books. To learn more about Tina, please visit her website at tinadesalvo.com. And now, 3, 2, 1, cue talent.
Good evening, I'm Tina DeSalvo, and this is CCTV5 News. I did that for like a lot of years, and here's another one I did a lot of. And the final score, New Orleans Saints 28, Atlanta Falcons 0. For CCTV5 Sports, I'm Tina DeSalvo. And then on occasion, I was able to report for some networks, and it would go like this. Hurricane Juan has left 90% of the South Lafourche community flooded. It will take weeks for the water to subside. Tina DeSalvo, CBS News. So that's kind of what my world was for a long time. Well, I'd like to thank all of you for coming here and being part of the Bonnie Bourg Lecture Series and to hear me as I talk. Now, I am so used to having copy written and reading from copy that's what I'm going to do because that's my comfort zone. Memorizing and just talking is not where I spent my career, and it's not what I'm used to doing, so just bear with me. But I'm really glad to be here because it's at Nicholls on campus, my alma mater. And I learned so much coming to Nicholls. I have to put my glasses on, sorry. That's something I didn't have to do when I was younger. So, okay, I'm going to have a bad hair moment here, excuse me. I came to Nicholls 18 years old with a certain worldview, what I thought the world was. Things I didn't know existed were in that worldview. So when I had limitations, my limitations were because of the things I didn't know. I guess discovering what else is out there, expanding that worldview, is what a higher education is all about. And that way, Nicholls State really succeeded in helping me and teaching me. See, back up. This is also for my training. This doesn't work. I have that. I have a fail-safe. You have 2 sets of copy up here, too, if you want to know the truth. Remember that. So I learned through Nichols State, as I expanded my worldview, that nothing was off limits. And I also learned that my worldview would change throughout my life, as long as I had passion, skills, and this. We'll get to that in a little bit. So I arrived here, as many of you do, eager to get my degree, because getting the degree was what was important. It's what I understood that I had to do, and it would be my road to success. Without it, I would be continuing on the path that so many of my family members had. Not that there was anything wrong with it, but I was going to be the first to graduate college in my family. And that's what my immigrant grandparents and great-grandparents wanted for me. It's what my parents wanted for me, and it's really what I wanted for myself. There was nothing wrong with not having a degree, but it wasn't the path I wanted to move forward with. You see, my parents really wanted me to get that college degree. They both didn't even have a high school diploma. They got it later in life. My mother, Ann, was from New York City, and she got a fashion industry degree, which was given to students. You can decide to get your high school diploma, or you can go into the fashion industry, as the garment industry was really big in New York. In fact, her parents, who were immigrants from Italy, and her 9 siblings all worked in the garment industry, and so did she. She only decided to get her GED much later in life because she had to. My dad became disabled, and she needed help in supporting the family and help provide for them. But she understood that education would get her a better paying job, one with benefits, even a high school education. She worked sewing at Wimbley Ties in New Orleans. She also was a cafeteria worker, dietary aide at a hospital in Marrero as well. So in her 40s, she went and got her GED, and she got it with my sister, who didn't have her high school diploma at the time either. And she did get a better job. And my father worked on his farm. In Marrero, they actually had farms, and it really wasn't the family farm. They were basically sharecroppers. And so he milked cows, and he baled hay, and he loved it. And he quit school to help support his family. He figured he didn't really need a high school diploma in order to milk cows. But when World War II broke out, he joined the Navy, as all the honorable men in our country did at that time, or most of them, and then later joined the Coast Guard for the Korean conflict. His worldview changed. His life changed. And then he looked at everything a little bit differently than he had when he was on that farm in Marrero. Jobs were limited, and now he had 2 children in New York City, and they were all living in tenement housing. And then he worked for the Long Island Railroad, and he also, at night, packed up trucks with books from the publishing company. He just wanted a better life for his family, so he thought he would move back to God's country, as he called Louisiana, and Marrero, and he did. And I was born there sometime later. My dad did eventually get his GED, going to school at night. Then he got a steady job at a chemical plant along the river. And he was living the life he thought he wanted and what was best for him. I'm not going to share with you guys all the hardships our family went through, the financial times, how difficult his medical condition was in the family. But I just want you to know that all of those things, as it is for most of you who have hardships in your family, and even if you don't, it forms who you are. It forms how you look at the world, and it also creates your ambitions. How you get to understand the world and your worldview and your place in it is influenced by the exposures we have. You guys have, a lot of you guys, have a different exposure than I did growing up. We didn't have the internet or social media. I read books, sat around the kitchen table, listening to the stories my family told of their history, of their past, of their day. I watched movies, I gossiped with friends, and I learned a lot from them. Sadly, they didn't know a whole lot, but it was sure fun to hang out with them. But the bottom line is, and this is something important that I just want us to be aware of always, we only know what we know. We only can react to what we know. So I challenge you to open your eyes, your hearts, and your minds to the things you do not know. Don't limit yourself. Don't live right here. Live out here. Learn the opinions of others, people that might have differing opinions, and then get the opinions of the people that are different from those people. Learn new things, experience new things. Just get out there. Listen. Be a sponge. If I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have had the career path I had, nor the wonderful life I have now. I came to understand that nothing is off limits. I could do whatever I set my mind to. I was really blessed that my father told me that, and I believed him. I want you to believe that. You can do anything you set your mind to. I came to Nichols as Daddy's girl. You're going to kind of discover that as I'm talking. I was a huge sports fan, and the reason I was because he was. It was an ability for us to share time together, to be together. We'd watch football games together. We'd talk about a coach's call or argue about it. We'd listen to his little transistor radio while my mom watched her favorite television show on TV. We only had one TV, so I didn't mind because I got to spend that time with my dad. But I never, ever considered that sports could be a career option. It wasn't in my world. I mean, I'm talking 60s and 70s here. I didn't know the passion I had for sports and the one that I shared with my father could be a career choice. I wasn't a super athlete. I wasn't an Olympian, clearly, and the Olympians were the ones that had these career paths involving sports, and they were the coaches. The super athletes were. I played sports, but super, nah. I knew I had to get my college degree, do something really honorable with it, and then I can make a good living. I could help my parents and my family if need be. I knew, because my parents really emphasized it, and education gave me opportunities. And you know, they wanted that for me, as your parents want that for you, as all of our parents want. It's a universal dream of parents to want a better life for their children than the one they had. But I didn't really have a handle on what a college degree actually meant. I would have to study something to get that degree, right? I just wanted a certificate. I just thought that was like the big prize. So I had to figure out what kind of degree I would get, what job I thought I would enjoy doing. I didn't really know. My parents were absolutely no help with this. They were really foggy when it came to college experience and what happened beyond that. They all just figured that once I got here, you guys would help me. The teachers, the professors would help me figure it out. They were just releasing me to my professors, which actually turned out to be a good thing. But I did know that I had a major in something. And I looked at the big four of our time, and that's teacher, nurse, doctor, lawyer. And of those, I thought, well, I didn't want to be a teacher. I mean, that's really honorable, but I don't think I was going to be good at that. And the nursing, the doctoring, all of that. I hung around hospitals way too much growing up since I was 2 years old and my dad first fell sick. So lawyer it was. I didn't know any lawyers. I never spoke to a lawyer that I knew, but that's what I was going to do. It fit my likes. So therefore, it was going to be what I would do. So there I was, age 18, planning for a career as a lawyer, although I didn't know what it meant. I kind of had an idea from TV shows and movies. My lack of knowledge was completely evident when the people I babysat for actually asked me, so what kind of law are you interested in practicing? Well, I had a deer in the headlight moment. I was like, well, I don't know, there's more than one kind of lawyer. Just thought you became a lawyer. So my worldview was pretty darn poor at the time. But I did see some sports lawyers on some of those shows that I watched with my father. They were representing some athletes. And I thought, that seems pretty interesting, involved being around the sports world. So I thought I'd do that. So what did it mean for me? So what would I do to get that law degree and the best way to represent athletes? So I did a little research on it, and I figured I didn't want to get my undergraduate degree in history or English, as I was advised to do when you were going into law school, or get a general undergraduate law degree. Now, this is way back when. Now, I'm sure it's completely different. But I did see communication arts, journalism. I thought, well, if you're going to represent sports athletes, you're going to be around TV and radio and that world. So maybe that's where I should get my undergraduate degree. So I just kind of moved into it. I had limitations only because of what I didn't know, and I was learning things. So it all seemed like a great plan for me now. My parents, my mom and dad told all their friends their baby girl was going to be a lawyer. They were so happy about it. My dad did caution me, though, that I needed two things. Two things I needed. One is this, and the other was typing. Don't forget to take typing, he kept telling me. You're going to need to know how to type in case everything fails and it's a bust. So I was in college, and I hated typing at the time, I have to tell you. I couldn't see myself like typing and being a secretary all day. So I was in college on my path to be a lawyer, and then I had this huge paradigm shift when I began taking my journalism classes. Whoa, I didn't know about this. The passion was ignited. I loved it. I always loved to write, and when I was young, very young, I had this black and white marble notebook, and I would write all these stories I'd make up, of giants that lived in my bathtub, and I could just go on. It's just really silly stuff, but in a child's mind kind of stories. But I love writing. I secretly did it every night. Now I could write about real things, real people, and others would read about it and maybe be interested in the same things that I was. Plus, it would make me a better lawyer, right? Well, the wonderful Dr. Al Delahaye, I don't know if any of you guys have had the opportunity, or some of you have met him. He opened my mind here at Nichols to the world of questions and answers, and writing about what I learned in that process so that others could learn about it too. He emphasized that there was a skill to writing a news story. Who knew? And there were different types of stories. You guys who are taking a mass comm know this. There's feature stories, there's hard news stories, there's obituaries and sports and other things. Well, I love meeting interesting people and experiencing interesting things when I got to meet them, which often was the really fun part, to get to follow them and to experience some things in their world. And I definitely tended to migrate to the sports stories. New coaches on campus, the big game coming up at Nichols, the running back that had this funny ritual before the game, that sort of thing. And you'll be happy to know, to make my dad happy, and I did report to him, I was typing a lot. We had electric typewriters in Dr. Delahaye's journalism class back in the day, dating myself, and we had a DDT, and if I remember right, and I think I'm saying it right, we had one in the class, and basically it was a word processor, and we all took turns using it and submitting and filing our stories. We also wrote our stories, and we did literally cut and paste, rubber cement. I was awful at it. My papers were always a mess, dripping with rubber cement everywhere, because I was always splicing and chopping it up. And Dr. Delahaye, when I visited him not long ago, told me, you always had the messiest papers. I said, yeah, if you look at this here too, it's pretty messy. It's just my style. So, and by the way, there were computers on campus, but that was for the computer science students. We never, ever touched them or even knew what it was. So all of my professors, Dr. Delahaye, there was Dr. Ron Cimarron, who taught broadcasting, and Bob Blazier, who taught the television production, gave me the freedom to report on what I wanted to report. They said, you want to do sports? Do it. Just finish your other assignments first, and then you can go ahead and do that. And sometimes I convinced them that the sports story actually fit into my assignments. They didn't stifle me. They didn't tell me, as I did here, that you're a girl and girls shouldn't do sports. I remember one of my professors questioning me once, though, on my reasons why I wanted to report sports. He told me that focusing on sports would limit my job opportunities. Not that he agreed, he said, but the time just hadn't come when men who primarily watch sports wanted to see a woman reporting it. But there were female trailblazers at the time. In 1974, Miss America, Phyllis George, was added to the anchor desk, the sports desk for NFL. She did interviews with players. She was very popular, she was loved, and she was beautiful, and was well known before they put her in the desk. She later moved to Good Morning America. After her was Jane Kennedy. She was brought in from the pageant ranks as well. She was accepted, sort of. Again, I was reminded by my professors, who were so wise, that the 1970 Miss Ohio was there because she was a beauty, not for her sports knowledge. She had been a model. She'd been on the cover of Jet and Ebony magazines, and she was an actress. In fact, later, after she left that position and she continued acting, she was dubbed the first black woman actress on the cover of Playboy magazine. I think you're getting an idea of what the times were like in the late 70s and early 80s. And both women had been called some really unkind things at the time. I thought it was totally unfair, but it was typical of our time. We would often hear that they were eye candy. They were there to pretty up the set. And this is the one I hated the most. They were Barbie with sports. But you know what I most remember about those conversations I had on the subject was with Bob Blazier. He suggested that if I was going to continue my pursuit of sports casting, I needed to go at it a little differently. I clearly wasn't going at it from the pageant ranks or being an athlete. He said I had better be good if I was going to do this. He had challenged me to be completely solid in knowing what I wanted to do and then to pursue it. If I didn't know what I wanted to do, I had a high chance of failure. But basically, him and all my professors here said, you can do anything you want, just like my father had told me, as long as you have this. And of course, I did know how to type in case it all failed. Well, that advice I used again when I shifted careers much later in my life, after I walked away from broadcasting into the world of fiction writing, when I decided I wanted and would write a book. And I wanted it to be a good book. Hopefully, I would be able to write a lot of them. I had to be solid, knowing what I wanted in that career, why I wanted it, and to pursue it only then. I had to develop my skills, just like everyone has to develop their skills in whatever career path they take. I took writing classes, attended seminars on the craft of writing. I asked readers what it was about a particular book that they just found so compelling. I also read the books of the best reviewed authors across the genres. And I tried to figure out a story's rhythm, the techniques, and best practices. And then I had to release myself also to allow my voice to come through. You can get great skills, but you can get too many skills sometimes, and you have to release yourself to be the person you are and allow that to project through. So anyway, back in college, there I was deciding to take advantage of every opportunity I had to develop my skills, to get good at what I wanted to do. That conversation with Bob Blazier and the looks and brush-offs I got when I was doing the sports stories right here on campus kind of cemented that I needed to make sure I knew what I was doing in a male-dominated world. I needed to be good, really good. I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to do that. Had no idea. I just jumped in anyway. I think I was naive. I was overconfident in the way many of you are here in college as a young person, and you should be. So there I was taking my classes, and I do want to, one more point I wanted to make there that just popped in my head. Don't overthink what you're doing too. If you want to do something, you know why you want to do it, you think you can do it, just do it. Don't overthink it. Go for it. So here I was, barely a sophomore, just starting my sophomore semester, taking my first broadcasting class with Ron Simmerall. And I heard of a DJ position at KTIB Radio that was being offered part-time. So I said, I could do that. I knew nothing about working on a board. I knew nothing about being a DJ. I didn't really even know anything about country music. But I rode my bike over, because I had a bike. I rode it over to the station in downtown Thibodaux, and I applied for the job. And I got it. I don't know why, but I got it. I guess I was willing to do it practically for free. But anyway, I worked weekends at KTIB, spinning those country records, dusting the office, and emptying the garbage. That was also part of my job description. Happy to do it, because I learned so much while I was there. And I was horrible at the beginning. Really, really bad. It was pretty embarrassing, but I learned from being horrible. In fact, Ray Sadie, who owned the station, KTIB and KHOM at the time, used to call me while those records were playing, and after I read live copy, and he would say, in kind of an angry voice, Tina, it's Ellis Bro. Ellis Bro. Ellis Bro, not Ellis Broad. Oops. And he'd also call me other times, because I was from New Orleans area. I was a Yat. And he would tell me, hey, New Orleans, present participles have a G at the end. It's not going, it's not shopping, it's not having, it's not playing. So red-faced, tears clogging my throat, so I ran into KBFG radio, which is now KNSU, and I absolutely love the station. And I practiced. I read the journalism stories I was starting to write. I picked up my history book. I read the UPI teletype, which no longer exists now. And I did whatever I could, because I was practicing how to do my readings. Mr. Ray Sadie called me a lot less often. I got a few more hours on the station, and I thought I was making progress. I still had to empty the garbage cans, but I was making progress. And I was typing. It was while I was at KTIB that I got to be friends with Roy Pugh. Some of you here may know him, or at least know of him. He was a sportscaster, the voice of the Colonels back in the day. And he was just really good. I mean, he was just like my idol. I wanted to be Roy Pugh. And he befriended me. And I would often work in the station while he did live remotes out in the field for doing play-by-play for Nichols, basketball, football, baseball, which he loved baseball. And I would also volunteer to be his gopher. I said, what do you need me to do? I'll do anything. I'll do anything. So I'd go to the games. I'd keep stats. I'd do whatever. And then, in a brave moment, I told him what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a play-by-play announcer. And women just weren't doing it. And he didn't tell me, oh, don't be so silly and ridiculous. He said, okay, you want to do it? Let's do it. So he set me up with a little portable cassette recorder, a microphone, and a headset. And he said, just sit off behind me during the Nichols basketball game and call the game. So I was like, yes, I could do this. I knew basketball. I understood the plays. I knew all the players' names. But when I did it, and then he offered to critique it after with me, which was like, wow, I was so excited. I was so thrilled. I actually had somebody that was going to mentor me, and he didn't say, you know, you're being a silly girl. So I did the game, and I was awful. It was horrible. Roy didn't tell me how awful I was, although he was pretty brutally honest. And he told me, well, you sound like a girl. I'm like, well, yeah, I am one. And he said, but that's not the problem. He said, the problem is you got to call the game when it's actually happening. We would hear people cheering 10 seconds before he even said what was going on. This is radio, you know, for a radio broadcast. And I didn't stop talking. I just kept going, and I was just behind. And he said, he gave me a lot of great advice. He said, just don't sound so female. I said, all right. I wrote everything he said down into a yellow tablet like he was Moses telling me about the 10 commandments that God just gave him. I wish I still had those notes, but they're embedded in my head. He said, use the vernacular, the slang, phrasing of the male announcers. Be forceful. Be confident. Develop the skills that are accepted in that industry. The skills that are usual and accepted in that industry. Well, that was incredible advice. It's still advice that you all should have today. It can transform into other career paths. It doesn't just have to be sportscasting. But I often wonder why he helped me. I did more games into that little tape recorder, hidden behind that little curtain. And I just wondered why he took to me and mentored me. Was it because I had the passion? I definitely had this. Did he understand that I was not going to quit until I had the skills? I don't know, but I certainly appreciate it. Definitely wasn't because I could type. Well, as time went on, I continued work on getting better. I began reporting on sports, utilizing all the things that Nichols had to help me. I did Nichols television, practiced doing play-by-play into a recorder, and also sitting on top of the press box during the Nichols football games. I would call the games from up there, and I had one of my fellow students would videotape to get the experience of videotaping a game as I did it, and then I'd listen to it and I'd critique it, and I'd feel like crying because it just, wasn't good at first. So I worked on controlling and modulating my voice in a professional way. I worked on my own, on my on-camera presence. That was really important. I learned all that I needed to know, not all, but I tried to learn what needed to be in the story to be compelling and interesting, and most of all, accurate. Compelling and interesting is not more important than accuracy. I also studied the game. I took a couple of football coaching classes. Coach Poinbuff used to teach Nichols football coaching here. I don't even know what he thought when he saw me walking into class that first day. I don't know if I was the first ever female student to take football coaching. I took several of them with him, but he welcomed me. He just brought me in the pack with the guys. He had me running plays out in the field with him, and he had me writing the X's and O's for the formations on the board as well. He accepted me. He encouraged me. My college years here were wonderful. I really got to work in developing my skills. It was available to me if I chose to take it and take advantage of it. Developing and improving skills, I learned early on, was going to be a lifelong pursuit. Something I welcomed because I was working on it while I was doing what I loved. By the time I graduated in 1985 in December, I had built a decent body of campus work. I had a good bit of work also out in the field in the real world jobs at KTIB and then later KXOR. I had a pretty extensive resume tape, I thought. So I intended to use it, and I went out on the job hunt. Now we get into the really difficult part of the story. My supportive professors were no longer there to cheer me on. I began interviewing for jobs I wanted, but not everyone. I better correct that and say not anyone wanted a female sportscaster, even in the small markets that I thought would be more receptive to having one. I was offered news jobs on television in small markets and in radio in medium to larger markets doing news. So I turned them down because I wanted to be a sportscaster. I knew what I wanted. I was focused. So I went to visit a friend, once removed. He was the nephew of a friend of my parents who was a sportscaster at WVUE TV. And he helped me put together a different resume tape just for sports. I figured if I could get a really good sports resume tape, I can convince those that were hiring, those news directors, that I could do this. But he did advise me, go ahead and push through, continue with the small markets, but don't be surprised if Louisiana, where most of these job interviews were, or Mississippi, or Alabama, or Texas, are not quite ready for a female reporter for sports. After 3 months of not finding a job and being very discouraged, being laughed at in some cases, I learned of a local origination company in Lafourche Parish that advertised for a sportscaster. So I went over there to CCTV5 and knew they had a great sports presence. And I liked it. It was in this market. It was near Nichols. They reported on Nichols games. And I graduated a little earlier than my friends, and they were still at Nichols. So that meant I could still hang out with them if I got that job. I was 21 at the time. If you think about it, 21 years old. So hanging out with my friends was still, a part of my life. So then I got the job in Golden Meadow. And the job entailed being a nightly sports anchor. They did a 30-minute newscast every night. It also involved reporting on Lafourche, Terrebonne, St. Mary, Grand Isle, sports teams, as well as New Orleans Saints, LSU, Tulane, and Nichols, because that's what the viewers wanted to hear about. And I also got to do play-by-play announcing, which was what I wanted to do all along. I did it for the South Lafourche High School football games and basketball games. I did some for Central Lafourche High School. Also did some other odd games as well that had come up while we were there. I wasn't a smooth road just because I got the job, I have to tell you. I had to work at it. Getting the job was difficult. Being accepted was a little difficult. The high school football players used to play pranks on me when I'd go to interview them for the game. Then I started playing pranks on them, and then everything went okay. There were not a lot, but there were viewers and critics who questioned me. Why do you want to do sports? You're a girl. Yeah, I was never a woman, I was a girl. You're a girl. Is it because of your sexual orientation? They questioned me there. Was it because of my loose morals? I just wanted to hang out with football players. But I didn't let it bother me. I knew why I was there. Bob Blazier and others had said, be solid in why you want to be there. And I was. I just wanted to report on the game that I loved, the games that I loved. Just like other women who were around loved the game. They were just like the men loved the game, just like my father loved the game. I just wanted to do that. What was wrong with that? There was no reason I couldn't do that. I also understood, though, at the time, because no other women were calling the games as I was. None were nightly on the newscast, at least not in our market, where they may have seen. That it was uncomfortable for them. It was different. Hey, I was a 21-year-old young woman doing this in a place that nobody ever did it before. I was walking on new, unmapped territory, and that was uncomfortable for people. Even the national markets, as I mentioned, didn't really have much going on in the way of sportscasters. Not people that actually reported the sports game. Well, there were also positive and complimentary and encouraging comments too. One in particular always touches my heart when I think about it. The man who did my color analyst for the play-by-play, he was my commentator, while I did play-by-play for the South Lafourche football games, was an old coach. He had a gravelly voice, and he had been doing it a really long time. He didn't want me there at first either. But he soon came to accept me, and he came to mentor me, which was really important. Later on, he wrote a letter, an op-ed, for the Lafourche Gazette, much later on. And he announced how forward-thinking and lucky our area was to have what he believed was the first female play-by-play announcer at the time. It just wasn't done, he had said. His acceptance of me, I will tell you, sitting next to me in that press box, broadcasting the game on television, and then later simulcasting on TV and radio, went a long way to me being accepted. People respected him, and if he respected me, they respected me too. And it really came to be shown when one day we were doing our pregame show before the football game, and a former South Lafourche high school player, big star at South Lafourche, who was playing professional football, came up and we were doing the interview, and he invited him to be the color analyst for the game with me. And Coach Steve Stahl was his name, and what he did was he said, I'm just going to sit back, let you two do it. I mean, that was incredible. I couldn't believe it. He sat back and let me and this very popular football star do it. So the Cajun Cannon, Bobby Hebert, and I called that game and many others. We kept in touch. I reported him on the when he was in the USFL and also the New Orleans Saints. And we just had a great time, and we still talk about it today. As a little side note, which is really fun, I was at Immaculata High School in Marrero, and Archbishop Shaw, our brother school, that I cheered for, was in the state finals with South Lafourche High School. Bobby Hebert was the quarterback then, and I was the cheerleader on the other side. And, you know, it was a very controversial game. I can get into all of that if I had time. And so we joked on the air about that, how South Lafourche cheated us out of winning that game. Well, you know, being accepted or not as a sportscaster wasn't something I really dwelled on or thought about much. I just wanted to make sure I was good at my job, and I really still was working on that. I was just too ambitious, too determined, too passionate, and most of all, I was just enjoying what I was doing. to let anything be off limits. But you know, honestly, there were women that were trailblazers before me. I had access, they did not. And I was really blessed to be able to work in the market that I did. I initially thought I would be in the national market. I mean, that was my dream here at Nichols. I'm going to be in New York. I'm going to be reporting on the big games. But you know, as the opportunities around me changed, and I learned about other things available to me while I was in a smaller market, I realized I really liked the smaller market. I often covered news events. I migrated into news at one point because I decided to stay in that market, and I was having my family, and you know, honestly, sports is wonderful. I still love sports, but the games are at night. They're on weekends. It's not really great when you're raising a family. So anyway, I decided to stay in a smaller market, and it afforded me the opportunity to do some incredible things that I wouldn't have been able to do in a different market. I would have been limited, and my focus would have been more narrow. But I was able to do on-air work. I was able to write, produce, do documentaries, you know, commercial production. I did industrial videos. I did editing. I did a lot of things. I had some big standout moments in my sportscasting career, and then later my news career. I had filed countless reports for the big networks, Associated Press, UPI for a little while. I think they folded pretty soon into my career. New Orleans channels. Just when there was a big story in our market, they would call me and ask me to do it for them. And I would, happily. They didn't pay much, by the way, just so you know. I get a check for them afterwards, $15 to cover Hurricane Juan for them. That was 4 reports. I don't even know what the matrix was on that one. But you know what, honestly, I'd call my family in New York. I'd call them all over, and I'd say, I'm going to be on the national news. So, you know, I had some rewards, and, you know, $15. Anyway, New Orleans paid $25 a story, so they were much better. But while I was doing those stories, and I was delving into the stories side by side with them in some cases when they did think we were worthy to come down to do the reports, I learned early on that they just approached the story differently than I did and what we needed to do in our market. They went for the headlines that would grab the audience and keep them on their station and not change the channel. That's what was important to them. The short little bursts. And there was a lot that they had to cover across the country. I don't think it's bad. It was just different. And I wanted to do the stories where I got to meet the locals. I got to report on them. And I got to really, really get into the story and report it where it would make a difference in people's lives. And I enjoyed entertaining them. So there are many things I look back in my early days, and I'm proud to have done. I would like to take a lot of time talking about it because it's just fun to reminisce. But just to name a few, my very first day on the job, I got to go acrobatic flying in this little bitty plane. I actually sat in the front seat while the pilot was behind me. It was with Corky Fornoff. He did 48 movies. He was a big deal. He did 6 James Bond movies. You might know who he is from. He did the scene where his plane flew through the airplane hangar. Well, I actually didn't do it with Corky Fornoff. Our news anchor had more seniority and was wiser than I was, got in the plane with Corky. I was in the plane with the hobbyist, the local businessman, who had just taken up acrobatic flying. No one told me I wouldn't have gotten in that plane. I'm terrified of heights, but I did it for my story, my very first day, trying to impress people. I was sitting on the anchor desk that night, and I was so nauseated. I did everything I could just to get through it. I also had the opportunity to land on super tankers filled with crude oil in the Gulf of Mexico, which was quite scary. I interviewed vice presidents and other top officials, NFL Hall of Famers, which thrilled me, top college coaches who I had admired my whole life. Most of all, and what I enjoyed the most, was interviewing incredible people that were doing ordinary things or extraordinary things for their neighbors. But looking back, one of the big standout moments, and a lot of people ask me about this because it is, I guess, very interesting. I covered the New Orleans Saints on the sidelines on Sundays, and I went into the locker room. At first, there were no other women reporter in the locker room that I could see. Maybe I was just too nervous and didn't see anyone else, but I tried to call the Saints headquarters to see when was the first woman allowed in your locker room. Well, the U.S. District Court in 1976 said that women sportscasters, credentialed, had to be allowed to go in the locker room after a football game, just like the male reporters were. You couldn't stop a woman from doing her job the same as a male. But so that was 76, this was 81 and 82 when I went into the Saints locker room. But as far as I remember, I don't remember any other women being in there. When I would go up to the door, there would be a security guard in front of the door in the Superdome, and he'd say, wait here. He'd go in, close the door, I'd be standing there, and I could hear him. Woman in the locker room, woman in the locker room. He'd open the door, I'd walk in with my photographer, and then I would stand on the bench because I did not want to be low. Men did not always wear their towels or change their behavior because I was there. In fact, it was just the opposite. In fact, one time I had a player who kind of made a thing of his towel and threw it over his shoulder, and I thought, yeah, I get it, and I would hear the comments, she wants to be in here, let her be in here, that kind of thing. Things have changed with the NFL since that time. They still allow women in the locker room. They still have those locker room interviews. I'm not really quite sure why, but they have 10 to 12 minutes before reporters are allowed to go into the locker room now. They also provide wraparound towels and shorts and robes if the player chooses to wear it. And also now the showers are no longer in plain view of the lockers. They're kind of off to the side. They also have the head coach who now is required to have a podium interview. But it's really close to the locker room because they want reporters to be able to go back and forth, and he's got to bring a player with him. But at that time, I remember Time magazine proclaiming the locker room, perhaps the last defensible male bastion in journalism, has gone co-ed. Well, I have a lot more to talk to you about, but I don't have the time because I want to open it up to questions. And I'm happy to answer them for you. But again, I want to emphasize this. This is so important. It's what I'm going to be talking about at the luncheon too. Have passion for what you are doing. Have skills. Really work on those skills. And don't stop because you think you've got it all mastered, because you don't. I can promise you. And have this. This is nerve. Always have nerve. Or as I really refer to it and think of it, it's courage. So be courageous and pursue your career. Thank you, and I'll be happy to take your questions now. If you have any. Now we have journalism students in here expecting questions. I can't tell you a few things until I see a hand go up, but I always get asked this: are men allowed in women's locker rooms? The answer is yes, they're not forbidden. But the thing is that generally you don't see locker room interviews for women's sports in general. But if a male wanted to go in there and there were female reporters in there, he was perfectly allowed to go in. And there are other opportunities, and you think about it, just women, this is just one little blip in history. There are other groups that were not allowed in places for different career choices, and they still are. Just don't think you have limits. Be courageous. Go for it if that's what you want to do. And work on those skills. Nichols is a great place to gain those skills. Anything? Do you have a question?
I was wondering when calling reports plane crash, how did as being someone in that situation,
I know, 3 decades ago. But I'm old. Yeah, it touches you, but you do your job, and you kind of feel fearless. Now, she was on a plane, not in the middle of her reporting. She was going to her reporting job. And this is something that the students that are in mass comm will discover, and I discovered it. I was so brave when that camera was on and that microphone was in my hand. I was a different person. So when I landed on that super tanker that time, I was doing my job. And these guys, it was a Greek super tanker. The Exxon Valdez used to offload right there. It was at Loop, Louisiana Offshore Oil Port. And I was there, and these guys were in asbestos suits. You can all you could see were these big white mustaches and these little glasses here. And they had these hoses pointed at us. I never thought anything of it until I saw those hoses and those suits. And I said, what's that about? And they said, if they see a little bit of a spark from this helicopter, they were delivering the guys that were going to test the crude oil on the supertanker before offloading it. They said, if they see a tiny spark, we're in the Gulf. They're going to hose us right off. Then I got scared. But yeah, when that happened to her, I did think of that. And, we put ourselves in some kind of crazy situations. I didn't have to get on that plane. I probably shouldn't, especially when I found out later that it was just a businessman it was a hobby, and he was friends with Corky. But it was fun. Yes?
Did you retire from small town reporting, or did you go to the big screen?
No, I retired. I did a lot of freelance work for a long time afterwards. I did also did magazine and newspaper articles, and it was really great because I got to pick the stories I wanted to do. I did a feature on Ricky Jackson, which was just really fun to sit down across the table from him. It was a difficult interview. If anyone's heard Ricky Jackson speak, he's a wonderful person. And anyway, so no, I didn't, but I went into fiction writing. I was diagnosed with cancer in 2008, and I just kind of looked at my life and said, okay, if you're going to write that book, it's time to do it. So, yeah, sorry, I went into fiction writing, and I'm loving it. I really love it. Before, I had to be accurate and factual. Now I can just make up stuff, and it's fun. And I use a lot of times the experiences I had to put into the books and my characters, but it's sure fun to make up stuff. There was another question there? Yeah.
Okay. So I was wondering, so there's a lot of stigma with journalism nowadays where like someone's like, why are you going to the degree with journalism, or like journalism is dying? How would you respond to someone who says that?
I think they are right in a lot of ways. Our world has changed. We get information in different ways. We have citizen journalists now that are reporting on things, videotaping things. I think it's harder to be a journalist in the national level because you need to really try to grab the viewers and really try to grab people in. So a lot of times they're rushing to the story without looking for accuracy. And Dr. Delahaye always said to double source or triple source a story. Just don't go for it. So I think it's harder now, and I do think that a lot of journalists are just trying to get out there and get that story out on and broadcast it first and accurately because the ratings are tougher and they have more competition. And because, citizen journalists are just great. And I just think that that's going to change our world of reporting. If we could just figure out which citizens are accurately reporting and which ones aren't doctoring and photoshopping their photographs. So, yeah, I do think it, and that's why it's really important to get good skills and to be accurate. Okay, I think we're, go ahead. Okay. No. None of them did, but I started developing, I am a girl, okay? I did sportscasting, but I do like women's fiction. A lot of the men don't like what I write, just in general, and that sounds kind of like, oh, men and women and, there's divisions, but I write women's fiction, rom-com, romantic comedy is what I like. I always have a theme that's based on life experiences. My first book, Ellie, the Second Chance novel series, I wrote while I was in cancer treatment. I had stage 3 advanced breast cancer. And while I was there, I wrote a story. Because there was a young woman in there in her 30s who had breast cancer. And she had 2 young children. But I thought, what if? What if she was never married? What if her mom had died of cancer? She knew that this was just going to be a difficult road for her. How would she live her life differently? What changes would she make? And so the theme is that. It's also about not knowing your limits, about only knowing what you know, and it's about her awakening and realizing that she did want family, she did want love, she did want the life that she wanted before the cancer. But I wrap it up with some Cajun crazies and some dogs out of control and, a Mardi Gras and that kind of thing. And so each one has a theme. Jewel, the second book, I lost my mom, and she had dementia, as a lot of people that get in their 90s. And I used that because, it was sad and it was funny at times too. So in that story, I just thought, what happens if my mom said she owned that plantation? And then she said things that actually made it seem like maybe she really did. So it's a historical mystery, but it is a romantic comedy. and a women's fiction story, and it's told from that point of view. Yes?
You've always been passionate about writing. Why did you pursue creative writing as your initial career? Why did you go to journalism first?
I know, isn't that crazy? Because I thought there were 4 jobs. I thought there were 4 degrees. You're nursing, teaching, being a lawyer, and a doctor. I hadn't, and I told my husband that, and he says, don't say that. They're going to think you're really dumb. And but I did read, and I did like the stories, but I did hear at some point that, it's hard to make a living doing that, But, yeah, you're right. I made a lot more money doing journalism than I am doing fiction writing, and I'm doing pretty well with it. But yeah, isn't that interesting? And it was kind of like a secret. I had that secret since I was, I'm not kidding, 6, 7 years old. It was a secret, So, yeah, good question. And I don't know, but I had to think really hard before I told anybody I was writing. It was a lot easier to say I wanted to be a sportscaster than I wanted to write romantic comedy. Go figure. But thank you, that's a good question.
So, in the Master College department, we've been letting students shadow us lately, and a lot of them want to go into journalism, but they always say their writing skills, they don't think it's good enough, or they're talking to people, they can't really do that. What's some helpful tips that you would give them going into Master College?
I think the first thing is just do it. This is your practice time. This is where you develop your skills. No, you're not going to be good at it. Nobody really is. And I think that you got to release some of that pressure, because I was awful. I'm telling you, if I had that tape, no one would ever see it. I'd be burning it today or hearing it, because I was awful. And by being awful, I saw how I was awful, and I was able to make those changes. The same thing if you're writing a story. You write that story and you think, and then you ask mentors, you ask people, but just do it. If you don't do it, you're not going to do it. It's just pretty simple. It's you have to be courageous, and you just go ahead and do it. What you got to lose? If it's that bad, don't show anybody, but just try it. Getting up in front of you guys is really hard for me. Put a camera here, give me some copy, just have me sitting on a desk. I'm a happy girl. But being in front of a live audience, that's really out of my comfort zone. I spent over 30 years being by myself in a booth or interviewing one-on-one, not talking to a group. So you just got to do it. Just do it. Every time you do it, you get better, and every time you do it, you get more comfortable. Except when you're talking in front of people, I think. But she's a good professor, I bet. I think the bottom line is what I learned with Dr. Delahaye originally. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. So when you're telling a story, you start somewhere, you got something in the middle, and at the end. The only thing, it's reversed in fiction writing. Your most important information isn't told up front, it's told at the end after the climax. So it's very simple. It's the same. You have to spoon feed the information out in a way using great words that tell the story. A word can be an action word and a descriptive word at the same time if you're limiting to a short little phrase. And the same thing is with fiction writing. If you put too many words in a fiction story, too many adjectives, people are just not going to read it, and they'll say, it started a little slow. But it's the same thing with broadcasting. Writing is writing is writing, and you're absolutely correct on that. And it's just the way you hand out and spoon feed the information to people in a way that makes them want to turn the page, to lean a little closer to the television, to listen a little bit closer to the radio. It's word choice, and it's giving that information right up front in journalism and giving it to them a little bit later in fiction. How did I know that? I don't even know how I know that. Nichols taught me that. Yes. Okay, I'm on Amazon, and you can go to tinadesalvo.com, and it'll direct you there. Also, I really encourage you. I've taken up a lot of passion for breast cancer awareness, And it's really not awareness. I'm trying to help people that are having difficult journeys with it. And on that website, and I really hope you guys go read it, there are stories of hope. And since you like to read and you like stories, these are true stories of people that have gone through this cancer journey, and it's on my website too. But my books can be found on Amazon, and locally, Hospital, I think, even sells it in Homa. The first book, Ellie, a second chance novel, I donate every dime I make on it to help with unmet needs for breast cancer. So you can feel like you're doing something good if you buy it. And leave a review. Let me know what you think. So accuracy. Remember, passion. Know why you're doing what you're doing. Get the skills. And don't think just because you figured out how to write a story that you know everything, because you don't. And just continue to develop your craft, whether you're a fiction writer, whether you are a journalist, whether you are a video photographer, whether you are writing a newspaper article. It's really important to develop your craft. You can read somebody when they wrote their first story and that same author at the end of their college career or later on, and they get better. So the people that are afraid, just say, you should see the junk that Tina DeSalvo wrote. It was bad. And I hope you like what I've done more recently. So thank you for that. I wish I had some video to bring for you. It was really hard to get it all together. Maybe one day when I'm able to get people and get it together. You know, we didn't always gather our video and keep it like you guys did with the phone. You know, isn't it amazing? Some people actually do their interviews on the phone now. I just think it's incredible. We had a 3/4 inch camera that weighed a ton. And I know that because sometimes I had a video photographer who was afraid of heights, even more than I am. And so one time we went to the Secretary of the Interior of the United States was in Fushan, and he was up on one of those really big jack-up barges, and I wanted to go interview him. He was in there having lunch and meeting workers, and I wanted to do it. My photographer refused to go because we had to, I know we're busy, we have to go. We had to be hoisted up on this big inner tube, triangular thing, all the way up to the top to get there, and we had to carry the camera, and he was like, I'm not going. So I took it, I put it in the middle in the net, and I laid in the net. I wasn't supposed to. OSHA would have cited them for that. And I went up there and I did the story, so I had to set up the camera, which a lot of people are doing now, setting up their own camera. At the time, no one did that kind of thing. And I did the interview. I did what I had to do to get that story. But the reason I'm sharing with this is just that you guys have such great opportunities, and I don't even know what's in the future for you. And you guys have to just be open for it, watching for it, learning about it, and just going for it. I'm really excited where journalism and where getting the word out and information out is. Just remember, don't live here like this. Live here. Explore the world. That's what's going to make you have the advantage over people you're competing against for the jobs. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here.